have two candidates who will be joining us later. They're delayed. So I'm just going to go ahead and start. Welcome voters, welcome candidates. We have 10 of the General Assembly candidates here tonight, or we will. If you have questions for any of the candidates that are not present, please correspond with them directly through their websites or office. You may also find valuable information online at vote411.org. The safety and security of all attendees is our primary concern at this event. In the event of an emergency, please exit the building through the nearest marked exit. Anyone engaging in disruptive behavior will be asked to leave the property. This is a private facility. Our hosts reserve the right to ask anyone to leave at any time, and will be backed by law enforcement if necessary. This is a nonpartisan candidate forum governed by the League of Women Voters guidelines for forum events. Questions were submitted from attendees and members of the host organizations. The moderators alone made the final decision on which questions to include. We are accepting additional questions from the audience as submitted on the 3x5 cards available from ushers in the aisles. Sorry, there's one usher. These questions will be asked as time permits. All questions will be asked by the moderators. If you have a question for an individual candidate, please direct them to their office. Each candidate will be given 1 minute to respond to each question, except for the first question, which they will have 100% more time, 2 minutes. League timers seated up front will have, sorry, I lost my place. League timers seated up front will display time cards to keep answers to their time limits. At the end, each candidate will have 1 minute for final remarks. This event is being recorded. All candidates should identify themselves at the beginning of each response by stating their name and district. The recording will be available on the League's website. We ask that all candidates be treated with respect. In the interest of time, please refrain from clapping and/or vocalizing. Hand wiggles will be welcome. Large signs will not be tolerated. Our moderators tonight are Joe Luppino-Esposito and Carolyn Hurley. Joe Luppino-Esposito is an attorney who works at a bipartisan nonprofit public policy group that works to honor, preserve, and restore principles of fairness in the criminal legal system. He works primarily in Washington, D.C. with members of Congress, their staff, and allied organizations to develop criminal justice reform policies that focus on protecting our constitutional rights. Joe is the Issues Committee Chair of the Loudoun County Republican Committee. He lives in Round Hill with his wife and 2 daughters, and serves as president of the Round Hill Owners Association. Dr. Carolyn Hurley is an associate professor at Northern Virginia Community College, where she engages in teaching and scholarship in the field of communication. Her current projects focus on creating partnerships between students and their community to foster a sense of civic engagement and responsibility. Dr. Hurley also strives to promote diversity and inclusion in all of her classes, and previously served as an instructor for international education programs in Singapore. I'll turn it over to our moderators.
Thank you, and welcome to Nova. I'm sorry, of course, I'm losing my voice after teaching 3 classes today. But we're so happy to have you here at our campus and exposing our community to your great work. So for our first question, could you please tell us why you are running for office and what will your priorities be? If you are an incumbent, how have you been active in Loudoun during your last term? Let's start this one with Delegate Gooditis.
Are we on? Yes? Okay. Hi, I am Wendy Gooditis. I represent House District 10. It reaches from Leesburg to Interstate 81, sort of across the southern parts of Loudoun, Clark, and Frederick counties. I was elected to this office in 2017. The 2 big issues that got me up and running first were fair districts for our voters, which would make our votes all count. It's It's a justice thing. So I'm anti-gerrymandering and vote that way in Richmond. The other thing was healthcare. We went through a crisis with my brother, PTSD, alcoholism, suicide attempts, and ultimately we lost him. He did not have the insurance that might have gotten him the help he needed. And that was a big issue for me. I ran on the expansion of Medicaid first time around, went to Richmond, got that passed. And those issues are still really important to me. I am an educator. I taught for more than a decade, so schools are really important to me. And I fight. In Loudoun County, I've worked on education issues. I have worked on the opioids crisis and gotten a bill or two passed to try to help with that. I have worked with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office to craft legislation that would protect children in situations of domestic violence or from sexual predators. So these are issues. Protecting our kids is so important to me. I worked on transportation issues and worked very hard to get the bill passed that it was originally intended just to provide improvements to Interstate 81, which is so dangerous, but ultimately we managed to bring back money to Loudoun County that had been stripped away in a party line vote the year before. So very proud of those accomplishments.
Thank you.
So my name is David Reid, and I'm the delegate that represents the 32nd District, which is the area right here around Ashburn. So it runs from Belmont Ridge on the west to 28 on the east side, goes up to the river, and then kind of goes down a little bit into Brambleton. So thank you all very much for being here today. This is really a great turnout, and it's great to see everybody here and interested in what's going on. When I ran in 2017, I ran on 3 key things. One was making sure that we could get full-day kindergarten for all the children here in Loudoun County, because at the time, there were actually only 3 jurisdictions in the state of Virginia, so Virginia Beach, Loudoun County, and Chesapeake, that did not have full-day kindergarten. The second thing that I ran on was college affordability. I'm the first person in my family to ever get a college degree, and so the rising cost of college and student debt was something that was very important to me. And then the third thing was to be able to tackle the ongoing issue of the rising cost of tolls. So I'm proud to say that in the 2 sessions that I have been in, we now have full-day kindergarten for all of the children here in Loudoun County, which is a really big accomplishment. The other thing is that I introduced legislation in 2018 and in 2019 to put in place a tuition freeze for the cost of rising tuition across all of the state. That then got implemented as a budget item in the 2019-2020 academic year. So for the first time in 20 years, we actually have frozen the cost of tuition at the level that was at the previous year. So that's a really significant step forward. The other things that I've done specifically to help out Loudoun County is we were able to get $2.3 million for the Children's Science Museum that's going to be over in Concordia. Delegate Gooditis and I worked to make sure that we kept the state park in the state budget so that we would be able to have a state park up in the northwestern corner. And I also introduced legislation that unfortunately did not pass, but it was the Renewables First Act. This would actually have required that we actually approve first renewable energy before we approve any new fossil fuel energy. So those are all things that are still very important to me, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you.
So this is on. Hi, so I'm Mavis Taintor. I'm running for the 33rd House of Delegates District. It's a district that encompasses a great swath of western Loudoun, and then because it is gerrymandered, it goes over the mountains west and picks up most of Clark County and then a big piece of Frederick County. Clark and Frederick, of course, are much more rural, traditionally red counties, whereas Loudoun County, as you know, is turning bluer and bluer. So it's as though I have 2 entirely different groups and districts in one district. So I started life as a teacher. I was a Head Start teacher and then moved on to other grades of teaching, including in the university level for a number of years. I then started a finance business of my own and grew it up and finally sold it. And then moved to Virginia to help with the family farm. So I live in this little town called Waterford and we have a family farm. So I find myself being a farmer. So I am running for a number of reasons, but the number one reason that got me up out of my comfy chair in the living room was, like Wendy, I have a story of mental illness in the family ending with the death of one of my sons from an overdose of heroin and fentanyl. And I saw how that child just suffered and how he wasn't able to get the kind of care he really deserved, the kind of care that is available. And we did at one point get him into a care situation in Virginia, but it was very hard to find and very, very expensive. So health care and mental health care and teaching and reinvesting in our classrooms are all issues that are key to me, and I feel I've lived through many of them, and it's why I feel so strongly that they are important for us here. I think
Thank you.
I'll yield the 10 seconds.
Well, thank you so much for the League of Women Voters for holding this forum. To start off, I'm glad to be sitting next to my twin, not in the things that you may be expecting, but actually in style. A couple of weeks ago, we were wearing the same exact suit. We didn't coordinate it this time, exactly. I'm Dr. Ibraheem Samirah. I'm the state delegate on behalf of the 86th district. That's all of Herndon, but also all of Sterling Park. So not too far from here. I grew up in the suburbs. I enjoyed a typical American childhood. Watched basketball from bleachers, ridden bikes with my brothers, and got around to doing my homework every night. That all changed in middle school when my father traveled to Jordan and was visiting my sick grandmother, was denied re-entry into the United States by the Bush administration. My family uprooted and relocated to stay together and fight for my father's reinstatement. 11 years later, we won. I worked hard in school so I could one day return to the country I love. I attended American University right across the river, and then went to Boston University and attended dental school there. Today, I'm building out a practice as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Suhas Subramanyam. I'm running for the House of Delegates in Eastern Loudoun County, the 87th District. First of all, I want to thank you all for being here. A lot of people don't actually know there's an election this year, so not only do you know, but you actually came out to a candidate forum, so you should give yourselves a hand. And this is not my first foray in politics, but this is my first time as a candidate. I've worked in every branch of government. I worked on Capitol Hill on healthcare reform. I worked in the U.S. Senate on criminal justice reform. And I worked in the Obama White House as a technology advisor. But one of the things that I found in every one of those experiences was the states have a lot of power. So even though people don't know about these elections and they don't vote at a high level, we affect your everyday life, traffic, schools, safety, healthcare, and in a really big way too. And so, I think that's sort of why I wanted to get involved at the state level to begin with. First, not as a candidate, but as just someone who's getting involved in these elections. And one of the things I saw was in 2017, Democrats made a lot of gains, but they were one seat short. But unfortunately, that didn't heal some of the divides that I'm seeing at the state level. We're in Northern Virginia right now. This is a science and technology hub, for instance, but the Science and Technology Committee in the House of Delegates is a punishment. People get sent there because they were mean to the speaker. You laugh, but it's true. And so no bills of substance go to that committee. We have these types of games happening, and people get away with it because no one's paying attention or enough attention. So, while I hear a lot on TV about Trump and impeachment, and it's important, there's a lot happening at the state level that affects your everyday life. A couple things that I really care about at this moment right now is preventing gun violence. I see Moms and Man in action here tonight, and I want to make sure that we at least do something to address the problem. We might have different ways of addressing it, but let's at least start to address the issue from whatever perspective that you feel we should address it. And second thing is, I think our kids should have a great education. And so fully funding our schools, making sure that the state is stepping in to fully fund and pay the teachers what they're worth. Those are two issues that I really care about. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
It's on. Is it?
Yes.
Yeah. My name is Bill Drennan. I am Suhas's counterpart. I'm the GOP nominee to represent District 87 in the House of Delegates. The boundaries are basically the Fairfax County, Loudoun County line, west of that line. Northern boundary is Route 7. There's a couple of precincts to encroach just north. Then you sweep down to what I call the empty quarter, Dulles International Airport. A lot of land, nobody votes there. Nobody lives there. Around down to the west of that, down through Stone Ridge, South Riding, south of Braddock Road, and into 3 precincts in Prince William County. 24 precincts total, 21 in Loudoun, 3 in Prince William. I'm running as a conservative. I think also of myself as a conservator. There are things about the American system that we need to cherish and perpetuate and honor and preserve. My background is military. I grew up in the Air Force. I enlisted when I was 18 to get an appointment to the Air Force Academy. I graduated, was commissioned, went through pilot training, flew out of West Texas for 1 year, and then went to Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War, where I stayed for 5 years, up through and including the evacuation of Saigon. That was one of the highlights of my 30-year career. The other highlight was spending 3 years as President Ronald Reagan's Air Force aide. When I tell people that, they always ask me 2 questions, so I'll answer them for you. Yes, I carried the presidential emergency satchel known as the nuclear football. And no, I won't tell you what's in it. I want to applaud the League of Women Voters for holding this. I also want to applaud you for attending. I will say that it is an honor to be up here with all the other candidates. This is a sacrifice on all our parts. I have no political enemies up here. We will agree on many, many things. That means we want the best for Loudoun County. Finally, my wife tells me that when I concentrate, I look really angry. I'm happy to be here. If I look angry, it's because I'm concentrated. And finally, Suzanne and I are outnumbered. You've got us surrounded, Democrats, but you'll never take us alive.
Thank you.
Good evening, good evening. My name is Ronnie Ross, and I'm running for state senate in the 27th district. It is a giant district, over 100 miles across. It goes Winchester, Frederick, Clark County, ducks into Loudoun County, out where I live near Middleburg, St. Louis, and Old Aldi, goes down through Fauquier, into Culpeper, and then over into Stafford just a little bit. I have put 6 oil changes on my car since I've been running. But to be frank, I never thought I would be running. I moved out here 10 years ago in order to teach high school. Show of hands, do we have any teachers in the room? Right, former teachers? Then you know, right? I have the best job in the world. There's few things better than seeing the look in a child's eyes when they realize that they can do something that they didn't think they could do. It's incredible. And that's what I thought I would be doing with my life. But things change. And for me, a few things change. One, my wife and I realized that we were going to have a baby. And turns out having a child is a great way to focus your attention on what matters. And I began to realize that out of the 50 states, Virginia was near the bottom in per pupil funding. I began to realize that Virginia hadn't joined the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. But then I also developed a really rare throat disease. There's 20,000 of us in the United States. And so when every single Republican in the General Assembly in 2017 voted to take away protections for pre-existing conditions, that was personal to me. And so my wife told me to stop complaining and running. And I'm here today. We've knocked over 62,000 doors. It's been the pleasure of my life to run. I can't wait to tackle education, healthcare, climate issues. But I would love to get some good government stuff done too. Everything from getting rid of dark money in politics to drawing nonpartisan districts. Again, my name is Ronnie Ross, and I'm so grateful to be here with you tonight.
Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Jennifer Boysko. I'm the current senator in the 33rd district, which is Eastern Loudoun County, Western Fairfax County, to simplify it. I served in the House of Delegates prior to that over the past 4 years in the 86th district. I just want to make a point. John Bell is not here tonight. I don't know if anybody mentioned his mother passed away last week, and I'm sure he's taking some time for himself. So, is he? Yes. Okay, I'm glad to hear that. But he's been a very good friend of mine. So you heard Wendy Gooditis and David Reid talk about some of the accomplishments that we made this year, $1 billion in funding for education, the park in Loudoun County, to make it into the state park, the Children's Science Center. Those were things that I worked on on the Senate side with my colleagues, and really pleased that we were able to bring resources back home for all of us to enjoy. I work on a bipartisan basis, but I am someone who works as a strong progressive. I have a long history of democratic activism before I was elected, and that does not stop me from finding common ground with folks, though. One of the things that I pride myself on is I don't claim to be an expert on everything. I bring people together from all different sides to discuss issues and to find solutions. So I held a roundtable to discuss how we're going to get to better climate results here in Virginia. I work on transportation, bringing the transportation experts in the community together to talk about how we're going to make a more affordable transportation system for us who live here around the toll roads. And I really am looking forward to this conversation. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time and interest, and coming out and voting is a wonderful opportunity that we all have, and so many people don't take advantage of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. I am certainly happy to be here, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for offering to have this forum. I think it's very important. My name is Suzanne Fox. I'm running for the 33rd Senate District as the Republican-endorsed nominee, and I'm very, very proud of that. The district is, what Jennifer said, she said it's basically eastern, western Fairfax, but to me it looks like a dragon. It's very, very gerrymandered. So, the western point is Leesburg, which is where I come from, and where I serve as Leesburg Town Council member. At the end of the day, elected office to me is about helping people, and I have the desire to make people's lives better. It's what I've tried to do for a long time, and I've always tried to find the opportunity to find opportunities to serve, but the opportunity to run for Senate actually found me. Serving is what I do and what I've done. I'm a mother, I serve as a grandmother, a wife, a businesswoman, a church member, and a councilwoman, elected official. I'm serving in my 5th year as being a Leesburg Town Council member, 2 of those years as vice mayor, and I'm pretty proud of that. And I've seen service in this capacity as nothing more than just service to my fellow man. Service is actually what unites us, and without it, we wouldn't be able to get things done and be able to talk to one another and actually reach out across the aisle to one another. As for my priorities, well, my priorities are also my principles. That is to protect life, liberty, and dignity. Again, I'm Suzanne Fox, and I'm running for the 33rd Senate District. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. What we're going to do tonight is that we started left to right. We're going to go right to left. We may start in the middle. We're going to mix it up. So, for the next question, Councilwoman Fox, we'll start with you. What do you believe is the most pressing economic issue for your district?
Economic issue?
Yes.
I'm not sure it's a pressing economic issue yet, but I do see a danger. Recently, the Commonwealth of Virginia has been voted #1 for business by CNBC, and we're very, very proud of that. There have been a lot of issues and a lot of work on the part of our General Assembly to get us to that point. I do see a danger, though, in some of the policies that I see on the horizon should some of the seats flip in the House and in the Senate. That would be basically, repealing right to work and things like that. The other issue I would say would be the issue about getting to work. The congestion, the high tolls. People are paying, a lot of money just to get to work, and I think that is probably #1 on most people's minds.
After talking, I work with the business community regularly. I've been endorsed by the Nova Chamber of Commerce and the Nova Biz Pack, the Tech Pack. And when I discuss this with the business leaders in the community, it's workforce development. We do not have an adequate supply of people who are qualified to take the 21st century jobs that we.
Over 25% of rural Virginians do not have access to broadband internet. Now, certainly as a teacher, right, that's problematic because my students have to go to Panera after school in order to get their homework done because so much is on the cloud. But I travel out to these farms and I talk to farmers, which is a very hard life, right? One full of dignity. They're working hard to get it done. And then they have to drive in to McDonald's at the end of the day to get on the Wi-Fi to conduct their business. Minnesota has rural broadband. They've done it through a number of really brilliant public-private partnerships. It's my firm belief that if Minnesota can get it done, so can Virginia. And so I am eager to work on rural broadband in the 27th district.
Bill Drennan from the House 87 seat. I'm going to answer a little bit broader, Joe, than the way you couched the question. District 87 is the most dynamic district out of all 100 in the Commonwealth. I'm not sure what's in second place. It's probably here in Northern Virginia, but it's definitely in second place. What keeps us that way is what I refer to as the ecosystem in District 87. And it consists of three things: education, transportation, and the economy. Those three things are why we're number one. We have to sustain that, we have to build on that, and probably the most pressing issue, or the most important issue in that regard, is completing the comprehensive plan for Loudoun County. The board just passed it. It needs some work, but it is a blueprint for the future. And in general terms, I support it.
Yeah, so Suhas, Subramanyam, 87th district. So this is, again, same district, Eastern Loudoun County, and it's got to be transportation in my mind, because I actually decided a couple weeks ago to call up 100 small business owners, just cold call them, see what their issue was. And the first about 30 or 40 said getting to work was their biggest problem, and getting back from work, and the amount of time they spend in traffic, and the fact that they would actually, some of them even quit their jobs so they could work from home. And my wife and I did the same thing, actually. We moved from jobs in DC to lesser pay here, and so then the last 50, I decided to ask them, what's the biggest issue to you? And then I said, for me, it's transportation. And then people started giving me money, so that's how you know that it was that it's transportation. And not only if Loudoun County doesn't get funding from the state for transportation, then the Board of Supervisors has to spend money on transportation, and then that means they can't spend money on affordable housing and all the other issues. So it's a trickle down. It's a big issue, and we have to fully fund it.
Delegate Ibraheem, Samirah again. So I was born in Illinois, and so I like to think a lot in Abraham Lincoln quotes. I have a quote for you. Labor is prior to and independent of capital. Capital is only the fruit of labor and could never have existed if labor had not first existed. Labor is the superior of capital and deserves much the higher consideration. That is the premise of my economic approach to the Commonwealth. I view that if you're empowering the unit of the economy, then the economy will thrive. Virginia was alluded to as the best place for business. It's the worst for workers. And there's reasons for that. There's a lot of conditions that create it very difficult for workers to attain the wealth that they need to have good transportation, to have good housing, to have a good life, overall good health care, good education. Across the board, everything relies on your income. So it's a central priority of mine to make sure that we raise the minimum wage, and that to ensure that it trickles up, not down, to the higher sectors of our employment society, so that people can live better on their own. Thank you.
Hi, so in my district, which is sort of a long, narrow east-to-west district, the major issue is that for families to get decently paying jobs, it means that they travel from west to east and back every single day. And typically 4.5, 5 hours in the car to do that, leaving from the western part of my district at 4 in the morning and getting back at 8 o'clock at night. What we don't have in my district are decently paid jobs for our families. We're very quick to give Amazons of the world hundreds of millions of dollars in upfront tax rebates, but when it comes to our small rural businesses and our small towns and where we should have thriving businesses, we don't seem to know what to do. And I've started businesses of my own, and I think we can do very well if we set our mind to it, to start rural businesses in our small towns in my district.
David Reid with the 32nd District, and I think the most pressing economic issues have probably been addressed primarily by Senator Boysko, is that we do have an issue of workforce development, and that's one of those recurring themes that as I talk to businesses throughout Northern Virginia, that's one of the biggest issues that they have, and so we really do need to address that. And that partly goes to the issue of college affordability. There is a role for us to be able to use the community college system to be able to actually train individuals so that they can be able to do the different work that's going on. And likewise, with what Ronnie Ross was saying, is that rural broadband, not just in that district, but in other parts of the state, allows us the opportunity for jobs for people that are in other parts of the state to be able to get employment here in Northern Virginia. If you're doing something in cybersecurity or penetration testing, then you can do that from anywhere in the state if you've got the right infrastructure to be able to do it. So affordable housing and workforce development, college affordability, all of those things are intertwined as far as economic issues are concerned.
Wendy Gooditis, House District 10. I'm last, so I get to say yes to workforce development, rural broadband, transportation, care of the labor force, supporting small local businesses, and everything you said, bud. And I will add to that the cost and accessibility of healthcare. If we don't have healthy people, then we don't have a workforce. If we don't have healthy business owners, then we don't have economic development in this. So the cost to businesses of giving benefits to their workers, the cost to the individuals who do not have health insurance through their businesses, it is crippling costs. There's a lot that is at the federal level, but there are things that we can do at the state level, and we need to work towards those. Thank you.
Thank you. For the next question, let's start with Delegate Reid and move this way. So what gun policy legislation would you propose or support, if any? What would you hope to accomplish with such a change?
So David Reid, 32nd District, and the question's about gun policy and gun safety legislation. So it's really a very interesting question because I can remember during the campaign as I was standing in an area in Potomac Green, there was a mother that was sitting about where you are and said to me, please, if you can, reinstate the restriction on purchasing one handgun a month. And the reason why she pointed this out, and I actually introduced this legislation in 2018, is she said, my son is a police officer in New York City, and guns in New York City are coming from Virginia. Virginia became the hub of the iron pipeline, and somewhere north of 500 and some odd guns have been collected off the streets of New York City, and those have actually come from Virginia. And so I introduced that legislation in 2018, and think about this. By restricting to one handgun a month, that means that you can actually buy 12. If you live in a family where there are 2 of you, you can buy 24. So it's really not much of a restriction, but it does help to prevent guns being purchased in mass and then being used in places like DC and in New York City.
Thank you. Ms. Taintor.
So I'm Mavis Taintor. The gun issue I'm most interested in are these red flag laws and ways of dealing with people who should not be having guns because they're going through some sort of crisis. And as you know, I've had mental illness and addictive issues in my family, including suicide. And I know that suicide is really sort of a spur-of-the-moment thing. And if you can stop somebody from following through, usually they go back to a more normal state very quickly. So it's that ability to intercede and take a weapon of choice away from Virginians. That interests me a great deal. And that is being done all over the country with very good effect. So I would look to do something bipartisan in that area when I get to Richmond.
Thank you.
Delegate Ibraheem, Samirah. For far too long, politicians who are bought and sold by the NRA and gun manufacturers have controlled the agenda on gun safety. We have had to endure years of inaction as our communities suffer from senseless preventable violence, mass shootings, but more so suicides. I pledge to support a suite of reforms that can preserve the right to gun ownership while making historic progress on curbing gun violence in Virginia. These reforms include universal mandatory background checks on all firearm purchases, a ban on assault-style weapons that are frequently used in mass murders, red flag laws that can stop shootings before they happen, abandon high-capacity magazines, bump stocks and silencers, meaningful waiting periods for firearm purchases, child access prevention mandates that can reduce accidental deaths.
Great, a lot of good answers, and so I'll just echo especially red flag laws and universal background checks. Also, in closing the gun show loophole is something I'd like to see happen. Just making sure anyone who purchases a firearm is someone who will treat that firearm with respect and will be a responsible gun owner. I think right now it's far too easy right now to get a military-grade weapon and to use it, and we've had a couple scares already in high schools in my district, or in the 87th district, and I've talked to too many too many parents who feel like sending their kid to school right now is a risk because they're not sure what's going to happen. They see what's happening in the news, they see what's happening all over our country, and so I think this is, either way, the General Assembly was supposed to try to address this in a special session, but they closed down that special session in 6 hours. We need to do something about it. All these are good ideas, and I want to hear more.
I'm going to be the contrarian up here, and I'm going to answer the question from the standpoint of the Constitution. Why do we have a constitutional right to keep and bear arms? There's two reasons, and they're both self-defense. First one is personal self-defense. Everybody has the right to life, regardless of culture, regardless of political system. That's a God-given right. The second one is the right to self-defense against an aggressive, dictatorial, autocratic, potentially totalitarian government. That's why we have a second. The number of abortions in Virginia in 2017 was 17,210. The number of gun deaths, the misuse of guns, was 1,041. That's a ratio of 16.5 to 1. How about this, contrarian? I'm going to impose common sense restrictions on the constitutional right to an abortion. How about ankle bracelets? I don't think very many people would agree with that. It's analogous to
Okay, thank you. Let's move on. Thank you. And Delegate Bell, welcome. If we're talking about gun policy legislation, but if you would like an extra minute to introduce yourself, we welcome that.
I'm Delegate John Bell. I apologize for coming a little bit late. Actually, was told the time was 8 o'clock, so I thought it was early. But it's good to jump right in, and I'm currently representing the 87th District, which is Loudoun County, Prince William County. The two gentlemen to my right are running for that seat, and I'm running for the 13th Senate District, which is also Loudoun, Prince William County. Retired Air Force officer. I served for 26 years and retired in 2007, and I've been in the General Assembly for 2 terms. This is an issue that, frankly, is, if I go over, I'm using extra time.
Yes.
It's particularly important to me. I've sat on the Guns Subcommittee for 4 years. 2 years I was the only Democrat on it. I have the highest anti-gun voting score in Virginia. Proud of that. But I will tell you, I'm a gun owner. I believe in the Second Amendment. But let's talk about the Second Amendment. It says a well-regulated militia. It doesn't say free-for-all. I mean, come on. If we can't have a background check, if we can't make sure that military weapons aren't sold in the civilian population, who needs a grenade launcher and a flamethrower? You can have a darn good barbecue without a flamethrower. I think we need to look at this. Some of the bills that have failed in the General Assembly are incredibly common sense. Having tax-free sales of gun safes. I like that bill. Most gun owners would benefit from it and would encourage safe storage. I don't think that takes away anybody's Second Amendment right. I put in a bill 4 years in a row that would require in-person training for a concealed carry permit. I've been in the military, I've served in combat zones. I think we need to make sure people who have weapons, particularly hidden weapons, are properly trained. I encourage gun groups to do these trainings frequently and at low cost, and I would even be willing to put state money towards paying for them to make sure they are low cost. I think it's important if somebody's sitting next to you in church, at a movie theater, or anywhere else, they've got a concealed weapon, we know they're properly trained in its own safe. And I don't think that takes away anybody's Second Amendment right. The last thing I'll say is, by any measure, the current approach, more guns every year, more gun deaths, it's failed by every metric. As a matter of fact, many have fought from having the CDC even study it. We need to study this and find out the causes and try to prevent it. But the current system, more guns, it's failed. It means more gun deaths, and it's time to do something about it. If we had a car, if we had an airplane, if we had anything else that caused this many deaths, we've taken action long ago. It's time for action. The time is long past. If I'm elected, I guarantee I'll do something about it.
Thank you very much.
So one of my great frustrations in life is that where I go to shoot at Clark Brothers in Opal, Virginia, has a giant sign of my opponent outside, Senator Vogel. I said, you know, I spend my money here, right? And they said, yeah, well, we know. So here's the thing. Whenever you can imagine out west, right? We're really, the Second Amendment's really important to us. And so when I knock on the door of someone and I say, what's your most important issue? And they say the Second Amendment, I say, awesome. Let's see if we can agree to some things. Do you think we can have background checks? Out of the 10,000 doors I've knocked, only one person has said no. I say, do you think that we should require daycares to lock up their weapons, and if not, it's more than a civil penalty? And they say, I think that's a great idea. I say, do you think gun safes under $1,000 should be tax-free? They say, absolutely. I say, the majority of gun deaths are suicides. If 72 hours waiting period will save a life, can you do that? And they say, sure. And that's my approach to gun safety issues, finding this common ground and then moving forward from there.
Thank you.
So now that I'm almost the last person to go, I can say that I agree with what Ronnie said, what John Bell said, what Wendy Gooditis said, what David Reid said. And I'm a gun sense candidate of distinction by Moms Demand Action. I agree this is something that families are very concerned about. When I go door to door and talk to my voters and my constituents, this is something that they want to talk about. I spent most of the day at one of the high schools where I was talking with students, and it came up over and over again. I want to vote on the floor. This is ridiculous that we have brought these bills up. We have tried to have a conversation with our Republican colleagues, and yet they have stalled every single time. We went, and I'm going to, Suhas said that it was 6 hours. It was an hour and a half that we were in session this July when we went into special session to discuss 9 common sense initiatives. We left the Senate without one conversation. It's not right.
Thank you.
This is an issue I do not take lightly, but I do believe we need to balance constitutional rights with public safety. We tend to have knee-jerk reactions when some of these bad things do happen, but any proper gun control measure would need to respect our constitutional rights to keep and bear arms, but be narrowly tailored to actually solving the problem that's out there. Most of the red flag laws that were referred to that there was presented lack the due process that's guaranteed to us by our Constitution, by the 4th, 5th, and 14th Amendments. So that is pretty important to me. And so it's not that I wouldn't consider any proposal, but I would do so with the strict criteria of respecting those rights and making sure whatever problem that we're talking about, we have a narrow definition and actually tailor our solutions to that definition. Our Constitution that we've all taken an oath to uphold was not written to restrain our citizens' behavior, but it was written to restrain our government's behavior.
Thank you.
Wendy Gooditis, House District 10. First of all, we have to protect our kids. And for those people who say that mental health is the issue, then you provide more money for us for the mental health of our kids and the whole population to protect our kids. Second of all, let me tell you about the red flag law. My brother was waving a firearm around, threatening suicide. My parents called the deputy, the good, wonderful deputy. My brother would never have hurt anybody. He talked him down, he took the firearm away. What do you think he did with that firearm? He gave it back to him because that is the law. Yes, my brother shot himself with that firearm. Don't talk to me about the rights of gun owners when they are in a suicidal crisis. This is a law that would temporarily, listen to me, temporarily remove a firearm from someone in crisis. Can you seriously object to that?
Okay, thank you. Next, I would like to start with Senator Boysko. So do you support ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which would explicitly mandate that state and federal laws give people the same rights regardless of their sex?
Yes, I absolutely support the ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment. In fact, I was very proud when I was elected to the Senate. It was the first official vote that I was able to cast this year, and it passed out on bipartisan basis through the Senate. Unfortunately, it died in the House, but that is something that I care a whole lot about. I look forward to us being the final state to send it back to Congress, and you can count on me to support it. And I will give the rest of my time to someone else.
All right, let's proceed to this way.
Yes. My wife and I have 2 shirts packed away in a trunk at the end of our bed celebrating when we finally ratify the ERA. We've been waiting far too long to get those shirts out and wear them, and I'm excited for that to happen this next session. So yes.
Thank you.
100%. Last week, my mother, who was 90 years old, passed away. And she spoke with me before her death. She had had a wonderful life and told me she was born in 1929. She said, don't you dare think about taking a day off from that campaign, because I want you to make sure that ERA gets passed. Because in my lifetime, I never experienced equality in that way. If we're honest, Virginia's had a troubled history of social and racial equality. I believe being the 38th state that passed the ERA would be historic, and it would really set the tone for who Virginia is today and who we want to be for tomorrow. It's a sad day that hasn't been passed many years ago, but it will be a proud day when we do pass it, and I absolutely will be voting for it.
Thank you.
I don't really understand the question, because there is no ERA. There's nothing to vote for. The ERA was proposed in 1972. It had a 7-year time limit. It got 35 votes in the states. It needed 38. Congress extended the deadline to 1982. It did not get any more votes. 5 of those 35 states rescinded it. The ERA has been dead for 37 years. So I don't know how to answer whether I support it or not. There is nothing to support. It is a nullity. Virginia will not be the 38th state. If Virginia passes a new ERA, and I'm in the House of Delegates, I will read it, I will consider it, and I will oppose it or support it based on what it says. But to say, well, I support the ERA, I do not support dead legislation.
Thank you.
I think the text of the ERA is out there for anyone to take a look at. And I think it's pretty common sense, and I also think that once we do ratify the ERA, which we will if we have a Democratic majority, we should also pass laws that actually live out that equality by making sure there's equal work for equal pay for women, making sure we address the disparities that women face in women's health, making sure that all policies are addressing the issues that women face in all those venues. And so, yeah, I think it's, I don't understand why someone would vote against it, but if that's the case, I'd love to hear more about why that would be.
Thank you.
The Equal Rights Amendment would finally clear the legal avenues to achieving gender pay equity in the entire nation. The gravity being that of 38 states required to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment to the Constitution, after half a century of activism in the face of gridlock, Virginia could be the deciding vote in 2019. In Virginia, all factors considered, Latin women make 53% to a white man's dollar. African American women earn 59 cents to that same dollar, while white women earn 79 cents to that same dollar. That pay gap is the effect of pervasive racism and sexism in the job market. Without adequate mechanisms of law to bring disparity to justice in the courts, it'll affect the job market. In the next era of democratic leadership in Virginia, we will ratify the ERA and achieve equal pay for all. As a medical professional,
In this next session, I'm of the generation where I can look back and have been denied jobs because of my sex. I was denied a wonderful grant that had been given to me, awarded to me by a state university. And when I arrived to actually to enroll in the program and start earning what I was supposed to get through the grant, I found actually the chairman of the department called me into his office and told me he'd taken the grant away from me and given it to a man in the department because the man had a family they had to support, and therefore I shouldn't have this grant anymore. Now, without an ERA, without these federal laws behind us, no state laws are ever good enough to protect women and their rights. We're never going to have equal pay. We're never going to have a situation where we can't be denied a job. And women in academia will still have grants stolen out from under them. So it is so important that we pass this legislation. This year won't be soon enough.
Thank you.
Delegate David Reid, the 32nd District, and yes, I would 100% support the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment. I have 2 daughters, and I have always used everything that I do to try to be sure that I'm actually providing for them better than they had before them. And I think that's the tie that binds us all together when we talk about all of these things. We really want a better life for our children than we had. And when Mavis talks about these things or other things that are related to this, it's about being able to establish a future for women where they are going to be treated equally in all different things, whether it's grants, pay, jobs. And so yes, I want to be able to leave a generational change effect for my daughters, and I would support it.
Thank you.
Wendy Gooditis, House District 10. I'm calm now. As to whether or not this is a dead piece of legislation, I very proudly will rely on our good State Attorney General, Mark Herring, and one of my most valuable constituents, in his opinion that this is indeed not dead, that it matters, that it's something Virginia can do, and we can be leaders on this. So let's please do it. And show of hands, everyone, no, not everyone, women, who in this room thinks that you should have rights equal to a man? Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Fox.
Okay, so legal scholars on both sides of the aisle have agreed that the ERA is what we call dead, and we should start from scratch. And I think that's a conversation we actually have to have. But right now we're trying to pass redundant law. Virginia does have equal pay, equal opportunity, and discrimination laws on the books, and we should uphold those. The 14th Amendment protects our life, our liberty, our property, and guarantees our citizenship, due process, and equal protection under the law. As a wife and mother and a small business owner, I've taught all 3 of my girls to fight for their equality of pay, equality of dignity in the workplace, and I'll continue to fight that also as your state senator. Virginia should have the Family Leave Act. We should make sure it doesn't bankrupt small businesses, but this is something that we need to work on and improve. And we do it in such a way that a small business would not be disproportionately affected, because small business is the lifeblood of our economy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I said we were going to start in the middle, and that's what we're going to do now. We're going to start with Mr. Drennan. A number of people have already mentioned transportation issues, but I really wanted every candidate to take a look and consider the most pressing transportation issue in your district and how you do plan to solve it. So we'll start with Mr. Drennan, go this way, and we'll loop around again.
I wish I could wave a magic wand and fix transportation. It's obviously not a partisan issue. If you're stuck on 28 or Route 50 or Route 7 in traffic and you hate it, it doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or Independent. I will work with the local authorities and do what I can as a state legislator with national authorities in terms of funding so that we can address the traffic trauma. We all suffer from it. I would like to see more of Northern Virginia's taxes stay in Northern Virginia with a piggy bank for the rest of the state. We don't get full bang for our buck up here. I would work to fix that. I would widen 28, widen 50, construct an alternate route to Route 50. Finish North Star all the way down to Prince William. There are many, many things, and the County Board of Supervisors is tackling this very strongly, and I will work with them hand in glove.
Thank you.
Obviously, transportation is a big issue for us. It affects our economy, but most importantly affects all of our quality of life. The thing I would do, which I think is critical, is get us more funding. And one of the things we need to do is change a system we use called Smart Scale. And that's how most of the transportation dollars in Virginia are allocated. If you look at the last few years, Northern Virginia has been shortchanged every year. Smart Scale doesn't take into account the growth of our area. So basically we're always taking a picture that's a snapshot of the past, and it doesn't consider the fact that we're growing in Loudoun County 33 people every day, and this is the fastest growth area in Virginia, one of the fastest growth areas in the country. I think Smart Scale, to be truly smart and fair for us, it needs to take into account our growth, because as we take the picture next year, we're going to be much more behind than we were this year because growth isn't factored into the scale.
In the 27th, the most pressing transportation issue is Interstate 81. If If you've driven 81, you know just how dangerous that is. I have lots of students who go down to James Madison University for college, and their parents make them take different ways to get down there. This is why I was so disappointed to see Senator Vogel, my opponent, vote against funding for 81. We got some funding this year in a really great fiscally responsible way, which involved looking at truck fees and diesel tax and raising it simply to corridor average. Virginia had the lowest truck fees and then the lowest diesel tax in the entire 81 corridor, even though we have the majority of the deaths of any state. So my job is to continue to fight for funding for 81 to make it safe enough for my students and all of us to drive on.
In the 33rd district, the metro and toll roads really are the biggest issues for us. And I'm a member of the Transportation Committee in the Senate, have worked with the stakeholders at the local level, so the county boards of supervisors, the transportation authorities, VDOT, bringing them all together to talk about what we're going to do to solve this problem. In 2018, we had a plan it was imperative that Virginia, Maryland, Washington, D.C. all agree on a structure for shoring up the fiscal safety of the metro. We had a deal that we worked with the chambers of commerce around the state and the businesses to get a recordation tax, and that would have provided an additional amount of funding. Unfortunately, at the very last second, one Republican convinced his colleagues to drop that initiative, and we ended up losing hundreds of millions of dollars of local transportation funding. I'm going to work to try to recover that money. Thank you.
The top priority for me is congestion and traffic addressing the oppressively high tolls. We are stuck in traffic a lot of the times up here in Northern Virginia. I want to push to reinstitute 2 of the 3 funding sources that we lost up here in Northern Virginia through NVTA. I served on an NVTA advisory board last year, and we tried to get so many things pushed through, and I was able to, on the local level, to get what we needed, but the funds were sorely depleted because of losing those 2 sources of revenue that comes from Northern Virginia, goes to Richmond, but didn't come back to Northern Virginia to help everybody in the area. So that is something that the first thing as Senator I would do is basically introduce a bill or hopefully sponsor a bill to roll back those tolls on I-66. My husband was caught in traffic and he paid $46 to get to work, and that just shouldn't happen.
So I mentioned it very briefly in my introduction. My colleagues will attest to the fact that I was about the loudest voice in our caucus in Richmond to pass this legislation that would put funds into improving Interstate 81. It started out as just Interstate 81. It grew to encompass funds for the improvements of 66, Interstate 66 and 95, and thankfully $20 million a year back to Northern Virginia. It was a disastrous move in 2018 when that one vote stripped that funding away from Northern Virginia. Surprisingly, it was a Northern Virginian who instigated that vote. Hard for us to understand. I have worked to get some of that money back, and I will continue to work on that because it really is vital for our quality of life.
David Reid, delegate from the 32nd District. I think there's a couple of things here. One is, and it has been addressed a couple times, is the continuing rising cost of tolls. And that is something where I have worked to be able to do something about in the last 2 sessions, and will continue to work on that. There are also parts of the roads around here where we can look at using them better, and I'll give you an example where it's the Dulles Access Road, where any of you who are driving into work in the morning headed east, and you see that vacant area there in the center access road, I've actually initiated discussions with folks at the federal level to see how we can use that. The other thing is that we have to be sure that we're continuing to invest in mass transit, because this is something where we are not going to be able to pave our way out of this. You look at other areas around the nation where they continue to put in more roads and it creates more growth. So we have to be able to move people more efficiently around, and that's through mass transit. And we've also got to be able to make sure that we have jobs in the area so people don't have to commute as far.
That was perfect, David. Thank you. I don't need to say much other than we have to add broadband into that mix, because if you have broadband, you can work from home and you don't have to get in a car for 4.5 or 5 hours a day. But in my district, the 33rd district, there are very few areas that have really good broadband that enable people to have small businesses in their home or for our local businesses to thrive. So I'll add that to your agenda. And otherwise, I absolutely agree with everything you said. So I'm going to, again, give you a few seconds.
Hopefully I don't use them. Well, top priority that I hear at the doors when I'm knocking in my district has to do with healthcare reform. Maybe it's because I'm a doctor, they tell me. Mental health epidemic in this country, emphasizing the direct correlation between mental health and poverty, discrimination, and isolation, so that we can treat this epidemic by attacking the causes rather than the symptoms. Lastly, improving maternal care in our state, especially among Black mothers who have growing rates of maternal mortality.
So there are a lot of issues in transportation. A lot of them have been talked about, mass transit, tolls, just some of the congestion that we're feeling in Loudoun County. But I think, funding is the number 1 and 2 and 3 issue. And this is a nationwide problem. The problem is, again, as I was saying before, when Congress doesn't fund infrastructure, then the states have to do it. When the states don't do it, then the localities have to do it. And when the localities aren't doing it enough, then we get a private toll road that's owned by an Australian company. So that's where we are right now. It needs to start, every level of government needs to be investing in infrastructure, investing in our roads, investing in our mass transit. I just challenge anyone to try to go from one side, from Sterling to Aldi, just in our bus system right now. It's almost impossible. And just try to look it up on Google Maps and see how long it takes to get from Sterling to Aldi. And then try to do it again during rush hour and see how that goes. I mean, it's really a big issue, and we have to address it, and it starts with funding.
Well, hang on to the mic. We're going to start with you on this one.
Okay.
And then we'll go in the opposite direction. What legislation will you propose or support to reform the criminal justice system in Virginia?
Yeah, I think...
Oh, sorry. A request to repeat the question. What legislation will you propose or support to reform the criminal justice system in Virginia? Sure.
Yeah, I would actually, there are a lot of things that come to mind, but I actually want to shut down for-profit prisons. I don't think that having a system where you can make money off of putting people in prison is a good idea at all to begin with. And so we still have, I think, 1 or 2 in Virginia. And so while, maybe, there are going to be other issues that I think people bring up that might make more of a dent in the system, and I think we should do. And decriminalizing some offenses, for instance, I think would make a huge dent in the system. But I just personally, it makes me the maddest that we have for-profit prisons to begin with. So I would like to address that.
Yeah, sure. The tough on crime approach is clearly not working in the criminal justice system, massive failure. Instead of reducing crime, it has led to mass incarceration of people of color and low-income people. I favor an approach to criminal justice that is both rehabilitative and restorative, where we address crime by attacking its socioeconomic roots rather than the communities it harms. One of the best ways to begin to end mass incarceration would be to decriminalize marijuana in Virginia and expunge past convictions that have historically targeted Black and Latino communities. While states across the country have seen impressive results from decriminalization, Virginia continues to arrest more and more people for marijuana possession each year. This clogs up our criminal justice system and creates financial and legal implications for thousands of young people who have done nothing wrong. Reforming our ending cash bail as well. It should be a top priority for criminal justice reform. Too often Virginians have been convicted of a crime or sent to jail simply because they are poor. Thank you.
I hardly know where to start because there's so much to be done, but I'll pick a couple of topics briefly. One of them being the number 1 place where we house people with mental illness today in Virginia is in our prison and jail system. We do not have beds for people with mental illness. We arrest them. We arrest them out of the emergency room. We arrest them when family is called because there's a crisis going on in the house. We arrest them and we keep them there for years and years and years with absolutely zero treatment. So that's number 1. The second thing is People are warehoused in prisons and jails with no job training, no increase in skills, no ability to learn a trade that they could use when they come out, and the only work they're ever given is really at slave wages and nothing that gives them anything to take out with them that would help them get a job. So those are my two off the top of my head.
As far as addressing criminal justice reform, I think one of the things, or one of the areas where we need to start, we need to look at some of the success that we've already had. One of the things that we were able to get accomplished in the last year's budget was to actually get funding in the budget for the 4th Circuit Court judge here in Loudoun County, or in the 20th Circuit Court, which includes Loudoun County and Rappahannock, and I believe also Fauquier. But that allowed us to then actually start doing the drug courts again to create a diversion program. Because it's really important that we look at alternatives to actual imprisonment. One of the other things is that many of us recently had the opportunity to meet with the juvenile and domestic relations judges, and it's interesting to find out that in the 20th Circuit Court we only have 3 juvenile and domestic relations judges, and we actually have a greater population to serve than they do in Prince William, where they have 5. So we've already submitted a request to actually get a 4th judge in the governor's budget coming up. That way we can actually deal with these things before you need to send someone to prison.
So our Attorney General Mark Herring's ears are buzzing because I'm going to talk about him again. Only an hour, 2 hours ago, I had a conversation with him about the decriminalization of marijuana and how that would help with a whole lot of things, including funding in this state. He told me that we're up to 26 or 27,000 arrests a year, criminal charges, 50% of those being minority, and those criminal charges follow these people throughout their lives. This is an issue. I think it's something we can fix. Also, very, very recently here in Loudoun County, sheriff's deputies arrested a mentally ill teenager and criminal charges and had him in jail. There were interventions, the charges have been dropped or were dropped, but this is still a mindset that we have to fix. We have to work on how to handle our mentally ill population.
I couldn't agree more. Mental illness patients, those who have issues, should not be incarcerated. And I think we need to have a much broader discussion and a much bigger discussion about mental illness. But my focus would be to prioritize the rights of the victims over the rights of those who commit the crime. We all have rights, but I feel like the victims are the ones being left in the cold with this. So that is something I would do. We too often overlook victims' rights, and I would like to see, I see that at all echelons of our government, honestly, not just in the criminal justice system. So I would like, that's the change I would like to make.
So I agree with many of my colleagues who talked about, I signed on to the letter to expand the number of judges to fully fund our court system. We need to make sure that we have public defenders who can actually defend the people who are being charged. But also, we can start this early on, stopping the pipeline to prison, making sure that we're working with our schools to do restorative justice as opposed to criminalizing children, which we are already seeing. Other things that I think have not been mentioned here would be talking about, in the diversion first area, talking about people with special needs. I spend a lot of time with family members of autistic members of our community, and we need to make certain that police officers understand when they come across someone with special needs that they need to treat them a little bit differently, that their mental capacity may not be what they see as a regular looking adult. And thank you.
Senator Boysko, you stole part of my answer. So I want to talk to you. We've heard a lot of really great ideas up here, but I want to talk to you about someone named Shane Herrera. Shane Herrera is a former student of mine who worked as a fellow on my campaign, and he said, "I swear to God, Mr. Ross, if you don't talk about the school-to-prison pipeline, I will never knock another door for you." Here's the thing. Restorative justice works. Fauquier County has reduced their number of suspensions hugely through restorative justice programs. Frederick County has done the same thing, and when they implemented these programs, Students of color and white students, their suspensions started to come in proportion to their proportionality in the school. So I think one of the greatest criminal justice reforms we can have is not having early contact with the criminal justice system for our children.
Been a number of really great things mentioned here that I agree with. I'll say one of them, we have an opioid crisis across Virginia right now, it's across our country. And frankly, instead of putting people in jail, we need to put them into treatment. Sometimes they have committed crimes and they do need to deal with those crimes, but at the same time, we can't have people relapsing in jail. They would have a 95% chance of relapsing when they get out. We need to treat them. The second thing, which I don't think gets really any attention, is the fact we need fair judge selection in Virginia. Right now, our judge selection is really a bunch of backdoor deals. Last year in Loudoun County, we had a public hearing. The Democrats hosted it. We invited every Republican to come. Not a single one came. We had the Bar Association and all the advocacy groups who had interviewed and vetted candidates present. We asked them questions to the open public with the press there. We selected a candidate, and unfortunately that candidate didn't give an interview in Richmond. The candidate was selected was somebody's beer drinking buddy. Virginia deserves better than that. We need to have judges who actually look like the people they represent, who actually are from the communities they represent. What we're doing today is a travesty and needs to be fixed.
John, the next time you hold one, invite me and I'll come.
I will absolutely.
Okay. We don't have so much of an incarceration problem as we have a criminal and mental health problem. That's why the prisons are filled the way they are. I also want to say something in defense of the police. The police are out there enforcing the laws. They didn't pass those laws. They're enforcing the laws. And it's personal with me. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I remember when my fellow veterans were being demonized as baby killers. They took the laws and the decisions made by politicians and blamed the soldiers for that. Don't blame the police for the crime problem. The police are part of the solution. They're not part of the problem. Now, I do agree with Ms. Taintor about prisons have become de facto mental health institutions. You don't have to go past the West Coast, the major cities there, to see that we have a mental health crisis here because we have deinstitutionalized them. And I agree with Suzanne Fox that the focus needs to be on victims.
Thank you. We'd like to start the next question with Delegate Gooditis. So community colleges serve the most diverse student populations in the Commonwealth and the lowest income students as well. Yet they also receive much lower levels of student funding per student.
More and more people are realizing it as student debt accrues. My husband, Chris, is right here. He and I have a son and a daughter, both of whom accrued 64 credits at the community college, Lord Fairfax, before going on to the four-year school. So it's a huge benefit. Also, there are slots in our workforce and our labor force that community colleges can fill beautifully with two-year certifications, cybersecurity, trades like welding, and it's something we absolutely have to do. And this is, I would absolutely be a proponent of more funding for community colleges. They're very, very important to our economy and our education.
Thank you.
I wasn't sure if we were going down to the other end first. So Delegate Gooditis mentioned a whole lot of really important things and really valuable things. And one of the things that I think we need to recognize is that in today's economy, there are different paths to success for different people. There was a time when some of us were growing up where it was really important for you to be able to get a four-year degree for you to be able to be successful. Now you can actually go to a community college, get a two-year degree, you can get a certification, you can get additional training, and then you can be very successful in the economy that we have today. And so I go back to one of the things that I like to point out on a regular basis. The budget that we pass every year is about priorities and a vision of what we want Virginia to be. And I think we need to recognize that the community colleges can be both that priority for training today, and they can actually provide the workforce for tomorrow for the vision of what we want Virginia to be in the future. And we just have to make the commitment to provide that funding.
Thank you.
So I actually took Spanish, a full year of Spanish here in Inova in this building, in the Waddell building, not just a few years ago. And it was an amazing eye-opener to me. Not only was I the oldest student by about 50 years in the class, And I was hanging out with all these, 20-somethings and 18-somethings, and it was just amazing. The quality of the students, the quality of the education, the lower cost per unit of education is just outstanding here. But what I did learn was almost everybody in my class, which was about 30 people, except for me, had 2 and 3 jobs they were holding while going to school here full time. And so your thought on what can we do better here and why can't we find some funding, more funding, I would really get behind something like that. I think it's a great idea, and I think we can just put more money into these schools.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, Nova Community College has done a tremendous job of advertising its results, and it's done a great deal of benefit for our societies out here in Loudoun, Fairfax, all over Northern Virginia. It doesn't have its own board of visitors, and I was speaking with the Secretary of Education, Dr. Carney, about this. This means that Nova Community College cannot advertise its own results to the General Assembly, to the body of the General Assembly, to say that we deserve more funding. I would work towards that, creating an independent structure for the community college system out here, so that it can punch for dollars from the state, just like UVA or George Mason or every other university.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what was said, and I think funding is a big part of make sure that the community colleges have all the funding they need and more. And I also think there's somewhat of a stigma right now around community colleges. I think so this was an issue that came up when I was serving the White House, and one of the things we tried to do is make sure every White House staff who had ever been to the community college, but we recognized them, and it turned out there were a lot of White House staffers who had done really well in the private sector who went to community college and got a great education there. And so we need to be recognizing the people who've been to the community college system, who've done really well, and make sure that everyone feels comfortable sending their kids to community college, and that when we do go to have people going to community college, they're having a great experience and they feel part of the system, and when they leave community college, that they're contributing back to the community college the way people do their 4-year colleges. So I think there's both a funding problem as well as an attitude and maybe a cultural approach that we can take as well.
Thank you.
As I mentioned earlier, I have a bachelor's degree from the Air Force Academy. I have a master's degree from Georgetown, and I am a dissertation short of a PhD from Catholic University. One of my absolute favorite classes was at Nova. It was on computers. I didn't do very well, it didn't stick. I'm a techno-peasant, but I enjoyed the class. I think it's absolutely vital to support and defend the community college system. I have 2 sons. One has an associate's degree from Nova. His younger brother has a bachelor's degree from George Mason. They both work in the high-tech industry. The guy with the bachelor's degree is a political science major. But he followed his brother, who doesn't have a bachelor's degree, into the high-tech field because he saw how well he was doing. That's courtesy of community colleges. So I think that if you want to talk about upward mobility in American society, you can't find a better example than community colleges.
Thank you.
I'm a big fan of community colleges. During my education, I started my college education at community college. My daughter's graduated of Nova as well. And frankly, it was what encouraged me to go on and get 2 master's degrees and really expand my education. I think the only way we solve the employment problems we have in Virginia today is through our community colleges. We have 30,000 cyber jobs in Northern Virginia currently open, and community colleges are the best path for helping people get certificates and things they need to take those jobs. I think what we need to do also is really, I think what Suhas said about the stigma, we need to attack that aggressively, because we use dual enrollment with high school students at community colleges, and we also use 2+2 programs, which are very successful. 2 years at a community college, 2 years at George Mason, UVA, Virginia Tech. Then we can dramatically lower the cost of college educations and not have students graduating with 4-year degrees with hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. And I think that is an albatross that will follow them for 20, 30 years. And community colleges is a great way of solving that problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and give a ditto to everything Delegate Bell said. But I'm going to turn this a little bit, actually. Right? Yeah, I'm going to turn this a little bit because you might have noticed it's campaign season, and we're sitting at a community college. And so of course we're going to say we all support it. I mean, it has the benefit of being true, right? Both of my in-laws don't have 4-year degrees, and they vastly out-earn me. But we're all going to say yes. Democracy is not a spectator sport. A forum might be a spectator sport, but democracy is not. And so I'm going to say it's on you to hold us accountable, right? Budgets are a series of priorities. We're saying we're going to prioritize community college. It's on you to see through that we do that. So yes, I support increased money for community college. Now make me do it.
I too support increasing funding for community colleges. About a year ago, I was sitting with Dr. Rawls when he was still the president here. He talked about the need for capital improvements in the school because they don't have the capacity to serve all the programs that they want to do. And he asked that we support increased funding specifically for that. So I'm on the record for being behind that. My mom brought us out of poverty. She was a single mom. And brought us out of poverty because she went back to school and became a registered nurse. I strongly value the opportunity for people to get an education at an affordable rate. I've also been a champion for things like expanding in-state tuition for our dreamers and access to people to have the opportunity to learn here at home. So this is a vital resource for us, and I'm very proud that we're actually here at NOVA today. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have a 4-year degree, and I'm proud of it, but this Nova campus is actually what propelled me into starting my business. I fondly think of Professor Brazy today. I'm sure he's still at the campus, and I wish he was here right now so I could say hi to him. But I think it's vital for not just students of college age, but also for adults for continuing education. I really feel like that community college does give us that vital opportunity, and it's a great segue for the college-age students to get into a 4-year state school as well. I'm very pro-school choice, and as far as higher education is concerned, yes, the dual enrollment is important. I feel like that the school system, the K-12 school system, actually pushes folks into the 4-year programs and bypasses the community college. I think it's vitally
Partisanship, I mean, at the federal level, we see it has just exploded. And I'm happy to say that for the most part, in the General Assembly, we find common ground on probably 90% of the work that we do. It is in that last 10% where the bombs are thrown. And what I've been really disappointed to see is that the Republican caucus binds their members to vote as a bloc. And so, as we were talking about the transportation issue, we thought we had a deal, and then they agreed together, well, we're going to oppose this. And so even though you might have had a conversation with your colleague to say, this is a good idea, don't you think? And he says, yeah, it is a good idea, but I can't do it. I've watched my colleagues vote against their caucus on the Republican side. I watched the majority leader walk over, stand on top of them basically and say, this is a caucus vote. We'll be having another vote right now. He walks back to his chair. You watch your colleague who had voted against what the Republicans want change his vote because they punish them if they don't do what they want. And that's not okay. I'm opposed to that.
Thank you.
Yes, I think partisanship is an issue. You saw it this summer during the special session that was adjourned after 90 minutes without even listening to the other side. I mean, if we can't listen, dear God, we're in a bad place. When I'm out knocking doors, a lot of folks will say, are you the Republican or the Democrat? And I'll say, well, I'm running as the Democratic nominee, but I grew up in Appalachia, and I'm the only Democrat in my family, and I still go home for Thanksgiving. And what I've found is I have great conversations with my family. I have great conversations with folks at the doors because I ground what I'm doing in my values. I get really clear about this is what motivates me, and that's where my policy flows from. And by starting at that value level, we find common ground to talk to one another. And so yes, partisanship is deeply disheartening. And it starts with listening, and it starts with responding as a human from a values perspective.
Thank you.
I agree with what Senator Boysko said. I think, frankly, there's a lot less partisanship in Richmond than people see. It sometimes has its moments and gets a lot of attention, but I will tell you it's a very collegial body. One of my biggest surprises when I was elected was how nice everyone was to me.
I will tell you that some of my best friends in the General Assembly are Republicans. I lost my son earlier this year, and several of those Republicans were the first ones to call me and were with me during that really tragic time. These are people that I know are good people and I respect. The last 2 years, I've passed 9 bipartisan bills, which everyone has voted for in the chamber. I worked on 3 opioid bills with 2 Republicans, Chris Daly, a doctor, and also Chris Billion, who is a dentist, and they were passed in a bipartisan way. I will work with anybody who's willing to do what's right for Virginia, what's right for our country. And I think, frankly, if we lose that, we've really lost a great deal as a country.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to echo what Delegate Bell just said. I have heard from other members of the General Assembly that it is a much more collegial, much more friendly place than many of us on the outside might think, and that's good. But we have to acknowledge that we're at a crossroads in this country. We're facing some fundamental issues. The parties are very, very different. We're fighting it out. I started my comments this evening by saying I don't have any political enemies up here. I have political opponents, and we are going to duke it out. And whoever wins that argument or those arguments will determine what kind of state Virginia is going to be. It will determine in large measure what kind of country we're going to be. This is a time of choosing. I'm running as a conservative Republican. Harry Truman said, and I'm paraphrasing it a little bit, but he said, give the voters a choice between a Democrat and a real Democrat, and they'll pick the real Democrat every time. I'm not running as a Democrat or Democrat-like. I'm running as a conservative Republican because that's what I believe in.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, you've heard a couple of things. One, that things are actually more collegial than you think in Richmond. But then you've also heard that people are agreeing that partisanship exists and it's getting in the way of getting things done. So why is that? Well, I think next year we're drawing all the districts. I think that's part of it. We have districts that were drawn by legislators for legislators, and the legislators are picking their voters, not the other way around. And so what happens is the primaries are the main events in a lot of these districts. And when someone wins their first election, they never have to be accountable again except to their own party. And so why would you have any incentive to work with the other party? You'll just get primaried the next cycle. That's the system we have right now in Virginia and all across the country. So the only way to fix some of this, to actually have fair redistricting, to actually have a system where we are accountable to, the delegates are accountable to their districts, and we need to just fix some of the divides in our politics, but it starts by the actual system and actually what's going on. I think a lot of people want to fix it, but right now the system's getting in the way of progress.
Thank you.
A lot of my colleagues here on this table talked a lot about collegiality, and it exists. It certainly exists. What gets in the way is when we talk about issues. And that is a problem. Because if we can't talk about issues that are widely supported across the board by Virginians, a lot of the issues that my colleagues and I talked about today on this table are approved by a minimum of 60% of Virginians, by all sorts of statistics. If we can't take these polls into consideration when we're making our decision-making process, we need to think about why that is. It's obviously structural. Suhas was just speaking about that. Partisan gerrymandering makes for partisanship divides. It makes for them to become more and more extreme. If you don't know who you're representing anymore because you chose a specific group of people to be your voters, it becomes more and more partisan, and it creates more divides. We need to go back to these core issues.
Thank you.
So I certainly pledge that when I get to Richmond, I am going to approach what we do in the House of Delegates with a very open mind. I have lived and worked in many different places around the world and have always been very successful, always been able to get things done, have always gotten on with the group of people I've been working with. I've lived in countries with entirely different religions than any that I grew up with, people with entirely different cultures than what I grew up with, people who look different than I look. And that has never stopped me or them from being able to work together and get things done. So I think an open mind, experience with other people will take me a long way to enable me to work with people who maybe look at the world somewhat differently than I do.
Thank you.
I'd like to agree with what Senator Boysko and Delegate Bell had said in that the partisanship that we see at the federal level is not something that is really evidenced when you actually are in Richmond. And I think that can bear itself out by Delegate Bell's example and also my own personal example. In this past session, I got 6 pieces of legislation passed. 2 of those, I was the chief co-patron on a piece of legislation with a Republican. So it is possible to be able to get things done and work together. The other thing that I would point out, and I addressed this earlier, we got $2.3 million in the budget to be able to do the initial planning for the Children's Science Museum here in Loudoun County. Think about the fact that you're able to get money from Richmond to come back to Loudoun County, and that's really no small feat. And that only happens if you're able to work with both the Democrats on the Appropriation Committee as well as the Republicans. And all of us that are up here were able to contribute to that. So it is possible to be able to do that. And like what Suhas and others are saying, I think the root cause of the partisanship that we see is the gerrymandering. It has become much more extreme and scientific, and that's what we've got to address when we go back in 2020.
Thank you.
Wendy Gooditis, House District 10, yes, the first issue that got me up out of my chair running was gerrymandering. It's something we have to fix. I have kind of a unique story as to an experience in Richmond. I've only been in there 2 sessions. This second session was in an election year. I give one example. I had a very simple bill, free to the taxpayer. I had the boots on the ground and the executives in this area that had to do with the protection of children. I had them saying into the microphone that this could save children's lives. It did not pass. Afterwards, I went to a very senior Republican, and he told me that there was an agreement on his side of the aisle to not pass any of my bills in this election year.
Thank you.
Well, we are getting to the end of our program. Also, we wanted to note that that last question was from the audience, so we appreciate that question. We had a lot of things we wanted to cover, a lot of things we did cover, but at this point we are going to start closing out. It's going to be our final round, so let us know if there's anything you'd like to expand on from one of your previous statements, or if there's an issue you think we addressed in our forum today. And just to mix things up, we'll start with Delegate Bell, since you didn't get to have a kickoff last time. You can finish us off, and I guess Mr. Drennan and Mr. Ross, you guys can find out who wants to go last.
First, I would like to thank our host for having us here, the League of Women Voters, NOVA, and everybody who put this on. Thank you. I think it's very important we have informed voters, and we have a chance to examine those who run for office. It's a great honor to serve the General Assembly. It's been the honor of my life. It was a great honor to be able to vote for Medicaid expansion and give health care to people who live in Loudoun County who don't have it. And I look forward to a time where we can vote in Richmond for things that will make a difference and save lives in relation to gun violence and also relationship to passing the ERA. I think it will set a new tone and a new day in Virginia, and I certainly want to have that honor and ask those of you who live in the 13th District for your vote on November 5th. And I'll work for you in the hardest way I can as a moderate, pragmatic legislator. And I thank you for this opportunity.
Running for office is really quite hard. We don't see our families. I was going to miss my birthday when my wife kept my son up late, and I walked in the door at 9, normally I get home at 11, and he said, "Happy birthday, Daddy." He's 2. I said, "Oh my God." And he said, I love you too, I miss you." And I said, "Do you know why Daddy had to be gone?" And he said, "Daddy knocks doors." And that's why this is an honor, because you need people at their doors when you talk about things that matter. I met a couple at the door. The husband worked full-time. The wife was 5 months pregnant. They did not have health care. I showed them how to sign up for the exchanges. They called me back 2 later. The man was on the phone crying, saying that they had health care. They could deliver their baby and not be bankrupt. And so that's why I can look my son in the eyes and say, "What? Daddy knocks doors." And that's why this is all worth it. If you live in the 27th District, I ask for your vote come November 5th. Thank you so much for being here tonight, and thank you for putting this on.
That was beautiful. I am very honored to be the senator in the 33rd District, and my priority is working together with people from all walks of life, all political philosophies to make sure that we're getting things done. Working to improve our schools and our workforce training programs, supporting our businesses to create new jobs, advocating for our immigrant population, and for residents who don't often have a seat at the table. Those are the things that I really care about. I was honored to be part of the bipartisan effort to pass Medicaid expansion. It's probably the most important thing I'll ever get to do, giving medical care to thousands of Virginians. And I'm going to continue to work on health care access, affordability, quality for everyone. I was really proud to work with the business community to bring Amazon HQ2 here to Northern Virginia. I work closely with the regional chambers and our environmental groups. I have a vast group of endorsements from the teachers, the firefighters, the Nova Chamber, the environmental groups, the women's health groups, and I hope I have yours.
I felt it a privilege to be here tonight. This was a forum that I thought needed to be attended, and I thank everybody who came, and it was great to hear everything that was said. I'm running also for the 33rd Senate District because I thought there needed to be a choice for our folks here in the district who felt that they didn't have a voice. I was one of those folks. There have been a lot of hyper-partisan issues that I have had some problems with, and I didn't think that some of the bread and butter issues that Northern Virginians were facing today were being addressed properly. The tolls, the transportation, healthcare, education, safety for our children. And I really thought it was important to bring those to the table. So that's why I'm in this race, and I would humbly ask for your vote on November 5th, which is, 20 days from now? I'm so excited. Okay.
Wendy Gooditis, House District 10. Thank you very much for this. This is a fantastic chance to learn about each other. A couple of things that we did not talk about. One of the things that got killed this year was our entrance into the regional greenhouse gas initiative. Maybe not everyone agrees with the fact that we have a problem with climate change, but don't we at least have to try? This is something that we have to work on. The other thing is, my husband and I have the care of my 89-year-old parents, both of whom have dementia. We are fortunate. We have the energy, and between my parents' insurance and our resources, we are able to do this. But we have an aging population, and this is something that Virginians are going to have a big issue with over the next decades, and I think we need to make progress in that area.
David Reid, 32nd District. So first of all, thank you again, the League, for doing this, and for Northern Virginia Community College for hosting this. And thank you all for everyone coming out this evening. As Delegate Bell said, this is really very important, and I want to kind of stress the importance of this because during these odd off-year elections, the turnout is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 30%. So every one of your votes is really important. So go out, take your neighbors, take your friends. The other thing that I want to say, and I've said this to other folks before, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be the delegate from the 32nd District. This is by far the best job I have ever had. And people will sometimes look at me because there's so much negativity with politics nowadays that they're like, what's wrong with you? The thing is that I have the opportunity to be able to talk and meet with people like you, listen to what your concerns are, and then actually go down to Richmond and do some positive good to actually try to make a difference. And that is actually so very rewarding and so very fulfilling. So I appreciate you for giving me this opportunity.
I'm Mavis, and I'm running for the 33rd House District. And thank you, League of Women Voters, for all the time and volunteer effort you put into this and putting this on, and NOVA for hosting us. It's just been wonderful. I guess I look at, in summation, that every morning I wake up and I feel very grateful that I live in this beautiful Commonwealth of Virginia. People here are so kind, so generous. Neighbors are so incredibly generous, giving of time, help, involved in a very positive way with other people's lives. So I just can't wait to get to Richmond and really build on all that love I have for Virginia and for its people and try to make everyday life just a little bit better for people in Virginia. Thank you. And I agree with David and everyone. Getting out to vote is the most important thing you can do
if you do one thing in the next few weeks, it's get out and vote.
Thank you. Again, thank you for the League of Women Voters. As a proud member of the League of Women Voters, I'm always glad to be amongst you. Something that we didn't touch much upon, I think, is the climate crisis. I could talk about healthcare all day, but I think if we don't have a planet to live on, then we probably can't be talking about healthcare. Experts warn that humanity has 11 years to drastically reverse the course or face irreparable harm from climate change. That means we've already missed our window for half measures and small ideas. In order to preserve our clean air and water, improve public health, and bring our energy grid and infrastructure into the 21st century, we need an authentically Virginian Green New Deal, a legislative plan of action to begin the economic transition to a decarbonized Commonwealth. Very important to think about. I hope we can have a question on it next year.
Thank you all so much for being here and for being so attentive. I really appreciate it. I just want to recognize a couple people. My wife is here tonight. She's 5 months pregnant, has a full-time job, goes to grad school, and somehow has time to be my treasurer. So I don't know how she does it, but I thank her so much. And then my uncle, we're talking about commutes. He actually came all the way from India to be here and help us campaign. So I really appreciate both of them. And since we're in a community college, I want to assign you all homework. The first homework you have is that you have to tell your friends and tell your neighbors to come out and vote on November 5th. If they can't vote on November 5th, you can actually early vote in Loudoun County in the evenings from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. So when you come home from work, you can actually go by to one of the early voting centers. And then second, if and when some of us are elected up here, stay engaged. Voting is not the end of your job here. You have to make sure that you come to Richmond, make sure that you hold us accountable. I put my cell phone number on the back of all my literature, so call me anytime. I want to keep hearing from you. But the best ideas come from people like you, from everyday people. So thank you so much.
Question for you. Did I look angry? I'm not. It's a pleasure to be here. It occurred to me as the conversation went along that I keep cycling back to the Constitution because I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution, just like my brother-in-arms, John Bell, like Rob Jones over there and the other veterans here. That's the foundation for my life. The Democrats up here are arguing from the standpoint, if I can characterize it this way, of the living Constitution. A living Constitution equals no Constitution. What's constitutional today will not be constitutional tomorrow. Justice on the Supreme Court summed it up. He said on originalism, don't make stuff up and don't take stuff out. That's the way we should approach it. On guns, just a few quick words. I'm not a threat to anybody. Anybody has a right to choose to be defenseless. Nobody has a right to mandate that I must be defenseless. That's my standpoint on guns. Finally, I want to thank my colleagues. I want to thank the League of Women Voters. I want to thank Nova, and I want to thank all of you for coming out here. I've made my choices. I hope I made it clear to you all. Get out and vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We appreciate you all being here. Thanks again to our hosts, the League of Women Voters, Nova Community College. And do you have anything else to add?
I hardly did this by myself. But I really want to thank all of the candidates who came. Believe it or not, it takes some courage to come up here and face all these questions. And they don't know what's coming. So thank you very much. And thank you all for attending. It's really important that we have people who hear what's going on. So we do still have a little bit of time to do in-person absentee voting. That ends November 2nd. And of course, there's the election on November 5th. You also might be interested, several Northern Virginia leagues are co-sponsoring a redistricting forum on November 17th at the Stacey Sherwood Community Center, so you might want to keep that in mind. Again, thank you very much, and thank you especially to our moderators who did a wonderful job. That was the first thing I wanted to say, and I didn't do it. Thank you, Nova. This is a wonderful place, and we've had such
a great partnership with you. Thank you.